Good evening. It's time to talk about the Book of Ruth. Yes, we've arrived that far in our walking tour through the Bible. I think we're on our 73rd step. The Book of Ruth in my Jerusalem Bible, which I've got just here, is one, two, it's about 3 pages. It goes from page, oh gosh, the pages are not very clearly numbered, are they? 351 to 355. It's 4 pages. So the Book of Ruth is a very short story by modern standards. It would have been quite a small little scroll once upon a time. What is the Book of Ruth doing in the Bible? Well, it's exceptionally interesting. Possibly, despite the fact it's so short a book, it is incredibly profound and incredibly important. First of all, it's the first book named after a single character, isn't it? We've had Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, etc. But now Ruth. Ruth is a person. Ruth is more than just a person. Ruth is a character in the literary sense. You can't really talk about Abraham's character. Can't really talk much about Moses' character. Okay, Moses is a great leader. He's got a hot temper and he's got a lot of staying power. But you can't really talk about Moses' character as you can, let's say, talk about the character of Julius Caesar in the play of the same name by Shakespeare. Ruth, however, has a character. Ruth is a distinct person. And we're supposed to understand her as a person. She's not a sign or a symbol, she's a rounded person. That's not to say that previously in the Bible we haven't come across moments of great human drama, but Ruth lives in a world which has been crafted. This is a crafted book. I know all the other books in the Bible have been crafted. This one's been crafted in a special way. This one has been formed as a whole all at one period, whereas the other books are compilations and have been worked over by many hands over many generations. Ruth was the product of somebody sitting down one afternoon and saying, I better get the story of Ruth on paper, and doing just that, writing it down and then honing it and then presumably publishing it. Why do we have the Book of Ruth in the Bible? Well, we have the Book of Ruth in the Bible for one very simple reason, and that is Ruth is the great-grandmother of King David, and therefore she has a great deal of fame in the sense that she is the great-grandmother of a hero. And so that has guaranteed also not just the longevity of David, the immortality of David, guarantees the immortality of Ruth. But Ruth may be in the Bible for another reason, and that is our forefathers in faith, our Jewish brethren, decided that this was so good a story, it had to go in. You couldn't leave it out because it was a literary masterpiece. It is a literary masterpiece, therefore it had to be preserved. Where better to preserve it than among the sacred books? Well, what is Ruth about? It's a story of a woman called Ruth. And here again, we see something else which is extraordinary about Ruth. There have been other females in the Bible so far, lots of them. We've had Sarah, we've had Rebecca, and we've had the wives of Jacob, for example. We've had the sister of Moses, the wife of Moses, and so on. We've had the daughter of Jacob, and so it goes on. But Ruth is got a whole book to herself. And also, a bit like Tamar, who, if you remember in that famous incident earlier, a bit like Tamar, Ruth is in control of her destiny. Even more so than Tamar, Ruth creates her own destiny. Now, I'm not saying that Ruth is a feminist book, although actually it is. I'm not saying it's sort of, what I am saying is this: Ruth is a story of a woman who is the lead character in her own story. Even Tamar has to manipulate men to get them to do what she wants. Sarah is also rather manipulative and scheming, as is Rebecca. Rebecca is definitely manipulative and scheming, which is quite an admirable thing to be. But they manipulate and scheme with men. Ruth is also quite manipulative and scheming, but in a much nicer way. Ruth rather is determined, she's resourceful, she's clever, and even though it doesn't say so in the book, she's obviously beautiful to look at and charming to meet. She's just an all-round good egg. And therefore, of course, the Hebrew scriptures being scriptures in which all the characters more or less are Jewish, she's an ideal Jewish woman. Again, a bit like Judith, if you remember her. Judith, in fact, well, we'll get on to actually. Judith comes. We've had Judith. It's a bit like Judith, which means, of course, just the Jewish woman. Now, it starts off at a particular time in the time of the judges. We're told that, verse 1 of the first chapter. So that time of pleasant, lovely anarchy, which is the time of the judges. And a famine occurred in the country around Bethlehem, and so a certain lady called Naomi, who's married to Elimelech, and has 2 sons, moves to Moab, that's the other side of the Jordan, in order to live in a country where there is food. So there's a migration. And once she gets to Moab, she marries off her sons. Her husband dies, she marries off her sons. But the sons are sickly, obviously. Their names do suggest as much. And the sons die. So Naomi is left with 2 daughters-in-law. Now, these daughters-in-law are daughters of the country. They are Moabitesses. And you would therefore expect severe disapproval of the fact that these Jewish men and their Jewish mother have arranged for the Jews to marry outsiders, because throughout the Bible until now, although Moses married an outsider, don't forget, throughout the Bible until now, we've been told marrying in is good, marrying out is bad. But we'll discover that when her son married Ruth, Naomi's future was assured. In other words, it was the best thing he ever did, or was the best thing was ever arranged, the marriage with Ruth. Now, the other daughter-in-law is called Oprah, and it goes back to her own country at the invitation of Naomi. Naomi says, well, your husbands are dead. I've got no claim on you anymore. You can go back to your own country. You can find husbands for yourselves. You know, the connection between us is severed. And so Oprah kissed her mother-in-law and went back to her own people. And she didn't really sin by doing that. So she goes back to her own mother's house and she leaves her mother-in-law. When you marry a man, of course, you move into your mother-in-law's house. You leave your mother behind. So now the man is dead, she's married, she goes back to her mother, and she prefers her mother to her mother-in-law. But Ruth elects to stay with her mother-in-law, which is most unusual. I mean, Naomi makes it absolutely clear, verse 11, go home, daughters. Why come with me? Have I any more sons in my womb to make husbands for you? Go home, daughters, go. For I am now too old to marry again. Even if I said I still have a hope and so on. She can't have any more sons. She has no more sons to give them. There's no possibility of them marrying their brothers-in-law. Go home. They don't have any brothers-in-law. Go home. Oprah then kissed her mother-in-law and went back to her people. But Ruth stayed with her. Now, let's imagine that you're Jewish. You're born that way. You were born Jewish. And therefore, you inherit the covenant. You are part of the covenanted people. You're born into it. Ruth is not born Jewish. Ruth is from Moab. She's a Moabitess. She's a foreigner. And yet she chooses to stay with Naomi. She chooses to stay with the Israelites. She chooses to become an Israelite. She is a convert, if you like, to the Israelite religion. Convert's not a particularly good way of looking at it. She's co-opted into the Israelite religion. She herself chooses to be co-opted. Now, God chooses us, okay, that's fine. We know about that, and we've had that so far in the Bible repeatedly. God has chosen the people of Israel. And the people of Israel said, and we, for our part, we choose God. Fine. Remember the covenant at Shechem and so on. But God has not chosen Ruth, but Ruth has chosen God. And she says to her mother-in-law, look, the mother-in-law says, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her God. In other words, she's going back to the gods of Moab. She's left the God of Israel. Go home too. Follow your sister-in-law. You go back to your God. And Ruth said, do not press me to leave you and to stop going with you. For wherever you go, I shall go. Wherever you live, I shall live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I shall die, and there I shall be buried. Let the Lord bring unnameable ills on me, and worse ills too, if anything but death should part me from you. So Ruth cleaves to Naomi, and Ruth cleaves to God at the same moment. And there we have some very interesting thing happening, because alliance with God is also an alliance with another person. In other words, the personal and the religious intersect at this point. Well, I'll carry on this theme again on another night. All the best. For the meantime, please read the Book of Ruth. Bye.